All right, 40K enthusiasts, we're looking at core 40K tactics here. In terms of evolution, in terms of getting you better as a player, we kind of go through these stages. And you don't need full mastery, of course. You need enough of a working knowledge to be aware of it and to be able to execute it on the tabletop. So the first is understanding the rules, right? Understanding generally how 40K plays, understanding the flow. You definitely don't have to have everything memorized. That's what your best friend is for, on there to kind of get that feedback, to ask, hey, what's that rule? Or you look it up. But to know kind of what's happening in the game. From there, you start to develop generalized tactics. You start to kind of figure out how each unit in your army plays. You start to figure out why your opponent is able to do something and you can't stop it because there's certain core elements of the game. An example, kind of a core fundamental rule, shoot at a unit and remove it off the table. Remove whole units. Pick a unit, identify how you're going to get it off the table, what it's vulnerable to in terms of dice flow, roll enough dice, make it go poof. We looked at this last week in dealing with this. And then from there, once you move through the basics of 40K, now you can begin to develop your army tactics. Now you can begin to understand your army and leverage it on the table. And from there, further and further. So I wanted to focus, we're going to kind of break this up and look for every other week up on the blog, but one or two of these core tactics to keep in mind with what's going on. And the reason why these core tactics are important to know as a new player, one, well, if you're aware, it's going to make you a better player. But when you're not aware, you get caught by surprise. And as soon as you get caught by surprise in 40K, the momentum has shifted tremendously. You're going to be, it's going to cause you to lose games. Here's the best example I can think of. This was this is a long time ago, but this really, really surprised me. I was playing my Samhan Warhost. Eldar jet bikes, Vipers, Wave Serpents, Fire Prisms. I was moving into tremendous skill with the army. I had about 80, 90 games in. I had brought it to some events. I was confident with the list. I was confident with the army. And Games Workshop at that time, this is how long ago it was, they released drop pods. The new Space Marine Codex came out, and you guys know Marines get everything, right? They released drop pods, but there's no model kit for it. This is way pre-Chapter House, where Games Workshop would release units in a codex, and they don't give you any models. You know, a perfect example, somewhat fairly recent Tyranids with Doom of Malantai. No model for you at the time. So dudes are modeling up a Doom on there. So drop pods come out. No one has them. No one's faced them yet. They're literally brand new. And my first game, what I would do with my Samhan Warhost, I would deploy in the center of the table. And then my opponent would deploy, and I would literally take all of my army and swing over and kind of engage one flank of the table. Compress it, volume all that dice, and then pull away. So my opponent has drop pods, and he made them out of this PVC pipe. They looked pretty well. I mean, considering there was no frame of reference or anything, just a description in the codex, they were pretty spot on. He drops them all in, and the drop pod rules are they just appear turn one. There was no kind of segment to them or half on one, half on the other, or full reserves. So all these pods literally drop down, and guys get out. And I have a whole Space Marine army in my face before I can move and get any type of cover saves at the time or get my psychic powers up. And like 80% of my army gets wiped off the table. And I'm like, what? This happened because I was not aware. And even right now, I'm like, I'm losing my breath. I'm thinking about it when it happened. I was like, wow. I mean, I played the game out. Always play the game out. In 40K, you and your opponent have an agreement. You're taking time out of life, out of other responsibilities, not to mention respecting your opponent. All the time that they've spent building and painting their army, respect that. Turn 2, turn 3, you realize this game is over. Then you know what? Fight to the bitter end. Do the best you can. Respect that. Play it out. Don't just be like, oh, you won, walk away. Like, that's not cool. That is not cool. So I was done. There was absolutely no way I was coming back. But every Eldar soul is worth millions and millions of the Mon-K. So I played the game out, trying to do the best I can, but I was taken by surprise. So if we can review some of these fundamentals, they won't take you by surprise. I want to talk about threat bubbles. What is a threat bubble? How does it relate to 40K? And how should we be aware of it? And how do you magnify threat bubbles? So let's take a unit. Let's talk Space Marines, right? I love to use Space Marines as an example because you either play Space Marines because you have Space Marines. You've played against Space Marines. You're a Xenos player. You're going to play against Space Marines, or I guarantee you will be playing Space Marines soon. That's going to be your next army. Space Marines are like the common, it's like galactic basic, right? Gothic basic. Everyone knows Space Marines. So if I take a tactical squad and I put it out on the table, think about the gaming table you played on last week. No other models on there yet. You put the tac squad down in the middle of the table. Now you're going to take your tape measure or your ruler, and you're going to extend out its movement. Then from the movement, you're going to extend out further the range of all of its guns. Kind of the maximum range, the minimum range. Extending that tape out, now mark off, because the unit can shoot 360 degrees, it's a circle, right? Now mark off the circle. Anything, that circle that's up there, anything that moves into that circle can be dice threatened by the tactical Marines. It's not just shooting, right? This is what captures a lot of new players by surprise. They move their units and they're like, okay, I'm good, I'm done. They shoot. They appear out of range, right? Your opponent's units might appear out of range, but then you forget, look, they can move up and shoot. Or they might have, through psychic support, ways to suddenly move up. Or they might be able to teleport and deep strike in. Alternate ways of moving. So all of a sudden you're like, wait a second, I thought it was safe, and now I'm getting fired. Look at a unit. Where can it arrive? What's the threat bubble? If we're talking about something deep striking in, the threat bubble can literally be anywhere on the table. It lands, and now draw a threat bubble out there. So being aware of how and when and where you can be harmed is going to prevent you from being taken by surprise. Now let's talk about magnifying threat bubbles. So on the left side of the table, we've got a group of tactical Marines. On the right side of the table, we've got a group of tactical Marines. In the center of the table, we've got my Cornate Berserkers coming up, right? They're going to run up and they're going to put you to the chainsword, the bolt pistol, the chain axe, all that type of stuff. If you move your first tactical squad up and your second tactical squad up, projecting that bubble, only one of the tac squads is going to be able to project the bubble into my Cornate Berserkers and shoot. However, if you move both of your tac squads forward and closer to each other, now that bubble for each one, that circle, that threat bubble, there's going to be an overlap. Both of them are going to overlap into my Cornate Berserkers. What this means is that the threat for me has been magnified. I'm not just going to taste dice from one unit. I'm going to taste dice from another unit. And now, while I might have been able to withstand one tac squad shooting at me, can I withstand the volume of dice of two? So as you look with your opponent's army, realize like it's not just one unit. These bubbles are ever moving and overlapping. So you might look safe. You might be like, my Terminators, they're resilient. I'll make those saves. Emperor protects. And someone moves, I move all my cultists, my massive amount of cultists, and now I have 3 or 4 overlapping bubbles, threat bubbles on here. You're in trouble. I'm going to shoot. I'm going to assault. I'm going to hit you up with a lot of dice on there. So this is one of the first fundamental skills that you need to calculate what your opponent's doing so you won't be taken by surprise. And second, you need to see it in your own army because absolutely 100% you want to overlap and interlock these threat bubbles for all the units in your army so you can leverage the massive amount of dice against your opponent.